Have you ever wondered what would have happened if the Third Reich had won the Second World War? A world with new borders, another history written, and a dark era dominated by total control. Imagine we are in a different 1945, one where certain decisions changed everything and gave the Nazi army the final victory. The so-called New Order expanded from Berlin, transformed into Germania, a vast and dazzling capital that dominated Europe and left the world in this alternate version. The Allies' resistance was crushed by precise attacks and relentless weapons. The fall of the Soviet Union, along with the defeat of London and Paris, were the great moments that marked the strength of a regime that once seemed impossible to overcome. Germania, the capital of the world empire. After victory, Hitler pushed for the construction of Germania, what they called the capital of the world. It was designed by Albert Speer, the Führer's trusted architect. This city not only displayed the power of the regime, it was also the way Nazi ideology turned into stone and cement. Huge streets, massive arches, and colossal domes filled the landscape, while monuments glorified the so-called Aryan race. Every year, parades and meetings with the leaders of conquered territories were held in Germania, making clear who was in charge and reminding everyone of the heavy hierarchy imposed over Europe. Every corner of this new Rome was a showcase of the triumph of totalitarianism, an architecture meant to impress while at the same time planting a fear that could not be ignored. The regime's control reached everything, leaving no corner of daily life untouched. Schools taught its ideology, children grew up trained to serve the Reich, and every person was closely watched. The so-called thought police truly existed, a special force formed by psychologists, spies, and a network of surveillance devices that spied on every house and every conversation. Propaganda reached every corner of Germania, repeating the Aryan values and shaping people until they became nothing more than simple pieces of a huge state machine that could not be broken. A scientific world, but inhuman. With brilliant scientists like Werner Heisenberg at its service, the Third Reich used science as a weapon to reinforce its dominance. In this alternate line, Germany managed to create nuclear weapons and advanced technology far earlier than any other power, becoming an unstoppable threat. The atomic bomb was not seen as a symbol of power, but as an instrument to impose order and erase any attempt at resistance in occupied territories. At the same time, concentration camps were transformed into enormous forced labor centers, multiplying across Europe to keep the workforce always under state control. In this world, science ceased to be a path toward human progress and became instead a tool of fear, repression, and submission. Medicine took a sinister turn. Genetic experiments, led by scientists like Joseph Mengele, sought to create the so-called perfect race, giving way to cruel eugenics policies. Children were born under a strict selection process. If they did not meet the traits the regime considered ideal, they were eliminated or condemned to a life of servitude and forced labor. Instead of hospitals, what existed were racial control centers, places where the government evaluated the genetic quality of every new citizen before deciding their fate. The Third Reich also saw space exploration as a way to expand its power. By 1965, they had already launched satellites and built a small orbital base, with the goal of ensuring their control over Earth and projecting their dominance further into space. Nazi propaganda presented the colonization of the Moon and Mars as a sacred mission, in which only the chosen Aryans could participate. The regime's technological progress was so tied to its racial ideology that any scientific or medical innovation was not used to improve human life, but to reinforce racial purity and keep it above all else. The Third Reich in America, influence and resistance. In America, history took a different path. The United States, weakened after a partial defeat against Japan and trapped in its own isolationism, chose a strategy of coexistence. From Washington, tense relations with the Third Reich were maintained, while Nazi influence spread throughout Latin America thanks to a network of military dictatorships allied with the German regime. This political network ensured that, even thousands of kilometers away, Nazi ideas and control reached every corner of the continent. In countries like Brazil, Argentina, and Chile, military governments backed by Germany applied policies inspired by Nazi ideology and ruthlessly persecuted anyone who dared to question this new order. But not all was lost. From Canada to Mexico, a secret resistance network operated, formed by academics, scientists, and soldiers who had managed to escape Nazi domination in Europe. Gathered in small scattered groups with limited resources, they kept the spark of freedom alive, distributing forbidden information, smuggling weapon blueprints, and building resistance in the shadows. Though it was a small movement, It served as a reminder of a past that should not be forgotten, a time when freedom was a right and not a privilege. The cultural darkness. The so-called Nazi New Order imposed a cultural dictatorship that sought to erase all identity and diversity that did not fit into its ideology. Literature was censored, and only texts exalting racial purity and supposed Aryan superiority were permitted. Libraries and books ceased to be spaces of knowledge and became weapons of propaganda, while any writing that encouraged freedom of thought was destroyed. With this absolute control, culture was transformed into a tool to glorify the Third Reich, erasing any trace of different ideas. Art and music were not spared from the regime's control. Works by artists considered degenerate were banned, and in their place, art that exalted Aryan strength and discipline was promoted. Painters like Picasso or Kandinsky were censored, and their works ended up destroyed or hidden in secrecy. Music was limited to composers like Wagner, while genres such as jazz or blues were banned for being linked to cultures the regime labeled as inferior. Cinema, under the direct command of propaganda, became a powerful tool. It glorified the Third Reich and dehumanized its enemies, serving as a massive instrument of indoctrination. Education and religion also failed to escape Nazi control. In schools, everything that did not serve to spread the ideals of the regime was erased, and children were indoctrinated in racial biology and the history of the Reich. Religion was reshaped until it became a religion of the Reich, where Hitler and other Nazi leaders took the place of saints and spiritual figures. Traditional religious holidays were replaced by regime celebrations, and the past was rewritten to present the Reich as a glorious destiny. Altogether, this system sought to extinguish any trace of individuality, creativity, or diversity, leaving the question of whether small pockets of cultural resistance might have survived hidden in the shadows. In this dystopian world, Nazi victory would not only have meant the fall of nations, but also the death of creativity, diversity, and human freedom. It would be a uniform and brutal world, where each person was reduced to a number, a simple piece, within the great machine of the state. A universe where art, science, and thought were not used to grow or inspire, but to control and oppress. Could a spark of hope survive in such a dark reality? How many generations would endure, even in silence, before someone rose up and decided to fight for a free future?